Okay, I'm going to try and go live again. I don't know what happened the first time round, but it didn't seem to upload to YouTube. So, hello and welcome if you're joining for a second time. Welcome and sorry if you tried to join the first time and nothing happened. I'm Mila Ainge. This is the Psychologically Speaking Adult Inset Imposter Phenomenon session. That's a bit of a mouthful. So grab yourself a cuppa, a pencil or paper. This session is now starting at nearly 2 o'clock, but we'll run for about 30 minutes. We've got two very short exercises, some psychological research to share with you about imposter and different ways of thinking about the way in which we experience fraudulent feelings. So let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about confabulation and crystal balls, memory, demystifying imposter, and last but not least, trust in yourself. So I always show this slide in every single webinar or session that I do. And these are all of the different roles, and I'm sure that there are a few more that I can add to this as the years go on. But these are all the different roles that I experience in a typical month. So I think most people know me as a psychologist, and actually I'm doing a PhD and I've done a master's and I've researched imposter phenomenon, which is why you're here today. I also run, I love running and I've done ultra marathons in the past. I'm still a student. I've done some podcasting. You might have listened to my podcast, Psychologically Speaking. I do coaching. I'm also a mum to this beautiful child in the corner who's busy painting and there in the bottom helping me in the garden. I'm a leader. I've got a part-time role where I've got a leadership role. I'm probably not the best gardener in the world, but I really enjoy it. I'm also a volunteer. So all of these different hats and roles that we wear, I've spent more time in the gardening and mum role for the last couple of days, and this inspired the webinar sessions that you're seeing today. This idea that as adults we need a bit of an inset day or an inset session to welcome ourselves back into our working week and to help us switch from one role to another. So what I wanted you to do really is to think about then, what are your roles? What are you juggling all of the time? And if you can, think about what you feel most imposterish in and least imposterish in. So are there roles that bring you more confidence, or are there roles where you are least confident in doing what you do? And you might want to rank that. You can rank it from 1 to 5 or 1 to 3. You can also think about what is it that you think you need to do to feel 100% confident in that role. And you don't have to have the answers right now. Have a bit of a think about that. Come back to it later. We're going to go on and think about some research and some different ways of thinking about imposter. And then I'm going to ask you about this question again at the end. Moving us on. So confabulation then. This is such a really interesting concept in psychology. So confabulation is this idea that we have memory errors and distortion and that we fabricate things, and there's this misinterpretation in our heads of things that have happened in the past and how we remember them. The most obvious way that this shows up is in dementia. So dementia patients, amnesia, people who have amnesia might misremember things, or perhaps thoughts are jumbled up. But at a very basic level, psychologists do think that confabulation arises because we've got this really natural need to have this understanding of our contexts and situations, and we're literally wanting to fill in unknown gaps. So it's such an interesting idea, because when you start to think about imposter and you start to think about whether we're remembering things that have or haven't happened or might happen, that's where we come to the crystal ball. So we actually spend a huge amount of our time, far too much of our time, thinking about what might happen in the future. And I don't know about you, but I've never found a crystal ball that scientifically is going to actually tell me with any degree of confidence. I know that I can affect outcomes in the future, and so can you. I can do things like practice, I can do things such as reading, and I can increase my chances of success by doing lots of wonderful things. But the one thing I can't do is say exactly what's going to happen on any particular given day. I have to live, and we all have to live with a certain degree of uncertainty. But here we are, we tend to spend a lot of our time looking into this metaphorical crystal ball and thinking, what if? What if everything goes wrong? Worrying about what other people are thinking, and also perhaps listening to some of the voices in our own head. So I want you to think about that, because I've got 2 images and 2 bits of writing on this slide, and there's actually 2 minor errors here, and I wonder if you have spotted them. So we've got a wonderful picture of a TV programme which was really popular as I was growing up, about 4 women in capital who it followed them through their loves and lives, and the main character, Carrie, was a journalist, and she used to talk about her life and dating, etc. And then obviously you've got Britney Spears, and Britney Spears is a really famous pop singer, well known for this song, Oops, I Did It Again, and her red cat suit. And so here you can see, this is something I've got off the internet, which is an outfit around how to dress like Britney Spears, and it's got her iconic cat suit, but also a headset, because Britney Spears is well known for the headset. But is she? So here's the really fascinating thing here. The fascinating thing is that Britney Spears never wore the headset in that video, Oops, I Did It Again. And Sex in the City isn't a thing, it's Sex and the City. Did you catch that? If you type in Sex in the City into Google, it comes up with images of Sex and the City. Google kind of automatically knows that we're going to get that wrong, because people say the wrong thing all of the time. And in psychological terms, when collectively a lot of people misremember or misattribute the same thing, we call it the Mandela effect. And this is because a lot of people, when asked, misattribute how Nelson Mandela died, thinking that he'd died as he was held captive by political prisoners. And he didn't. He died much later than that. But a lot of people have this collective memory of something that never happened. So we have this thing called false memory and familiarity bias. The familiarity bias is that Sex and the City sounds a little bit like Sex in the City, and it looks a little bit the same. And that familiarity bias is with Britney, because we're so used to seeing her perform on stage, dance moves with that iconic microphone in a Britney headset moment. And these things are really interesting because it's such a huge and powerful reminder that even when our memory feels real, it might not actually be very accurate or right. It could be completely wrong, because our brain is struggling to keep up and is trying to fill gaps with knowledge. Fascinating stuff. So, how do we know all of this? Well, there's 2 pieces of research that I was going to share with you today that I think are absolutely fascinating. And this first piece basically is about the idea that we make decisions based not on absolute brilliant recall, but just on a general gist or a feeling, which is quite worrying, really. But here's what the research did. So when we make decisions, they say that when we make decisions, we don't always rely on every single detail of the past. We're just relying on the general gist of what happened. And actually, if you were experiencing a really strong emotion, then it may be that what you remember is linked to the strong emotion that you felt rather than this experience that was happening. And if you think about something like confidence and imposter, It may be that you've experienced something before, had a strong emotional reaction to it, and actually that shapes then your episodic or your memory around what actually happened. So you might not remember the exact feedback you got in a meeting when someone said to you, "Oh, I really like that idea," but you might remember feeling a bit worried when somebody looked uncertain. So somebody can say something to you in a meeting or in a work situation, which is directly positive, good stuff, but perhaps you give more attention to the thing that made you uncomfortable. And that's really interesting, isn't it? Because it's then starting to layer up this thought that perhaps everything you're remembering isn't quite as it happened. And then that starts to guide all of your decisions. So, psychologically speaking, back to this thing again, where I'm saying we fill in gaps with nonsense. So, we're a really, really bad record keeper. We have all of these memories in our head, but actually, we fill gaps with nonsense too. And I think one of the biggest challenges we have with something like imposter phenomenon is trying to work out what's the nonsense and what's the truth. So, just to remind ourselves, what is imposter phenomenon? And I love to use this quote. This was from Great British Menu last year, and this is Louise Ellis. And she's actually a chef in the Midlands near where I live, and she's got a wonderful kind of restaurant that's opened now. And she talked about when she came into the kitchen, she was one of the only chefs who wasn't working in industry at the time. She was working as a business owner doing private chefing. And so, from my understanding, she was automatically going, well, I'm different to the other people here. They've got Michelin stars, they're working in these big restaurants. So I feel like an imposter. I've got some imposter syndrome. So there's that self-doubt that is she supposed to be there? She's supposed to be in this room. And actually for a woman to say that as well, that's particularly significant because we know there's not a huge, well, there's certainly historically not been a lot of women in chef positions. And then there's also that fear of being exposed. So perhaps she feels quite exposed as someone who's, demonstrably different because the VT, the little videos that they do, showed her doing her private chef and her background. And also, as you go through the series with her, there's this attributing success to factors such as luck, charm, or error. It's only as that person makes it towards the end they start to believe that, yes, this is due to my skill and training and my ability. So I'm adding something else to this imposter list. So this group of 3 descriptions of imposter, they're broadly, when you look at all of the research, the 3 things that everyone attributes to imposter. But I'm going to add in that imposter is also confabulation, putting in the missing bits of information, attempting to look into a crystal ball and failing miserably, and also this Mandela effect, this collective memory that we might all get sucked into about things. The fact that we might rely on the gist of what happened rather than the truth. So where do we go with this? Well, I'd said about the crystal ball, and so I thought, well, I bet it'd be interesting to see if there's any research on crystal balls. And as you can imagine, there's no scientific proven evidence that crystal balls work. There's a whole raft of research around people's beliefs and how that can give people positive emotions and make them feel good. So if you do use a crystal ball, great, good for you. If your crystal ball's only telling you that you have imposter feelings, then I'm just going to suggest you put it to one side. So researchers asked experts, who they called reporters in this experiment, to send messages, and then other people were evaluating those messages. And guess what? Here's the shocker. The people who were evaluating actually were more interested in making snap judgments about people who sounded confident, and they rewarded that over the honest answers. And the interesting thing is that the reporters themselves also lied to make themselves look more informed than they actually were. But the more uncertain the situation, the more truthful people were because they were less risk averse. So this is really interesting. It starts to tell us some really useful things. And when I say it starts to tell us some really useful things as a psychologist, it makes me go, And that is people shape their answers to look smart. Well, yes, I think social media is alive with that, right? I think, and nobody goes onto LinkedIn to look silly, do they? Well, not intentionally. And then we often doubt ourselves in uncertain moments. We assume, don't we, that if we don't know something, that perhaps everybody else knows something we don't, or they know more. And we worry about being judged. And this isn't a false thing to be worried about. There is a lot of research around the way in which women in particular and their bodies are judged in online spaces. And we know that this feeling of being watched is quite a phenomenon in the social world. We tie it back to something called context collapse. So if you listen to my podcast, season 1 of Psychologically Speaking, when I break down all of imposter phenomenon, I talk about context collapse and why online spaces in particular are a real hotbed for these different ideas of who might be looking at us and watching us. And so what the research scientifically is telling us about memory and about reporting and telling people things and feeling like an expert is that we shape our answers to look smart. We often doubt ourselves because we think that we're going to be judged. So imposter is a phenomenon. It's all around us. It's not just you. It's not something you have. It's something that happens to us in society. Here's where there's something very simple that we can do to think about this differently. If confabulation is making stuff up for all the right reasons and a crystal ball is worrying about all the things for the wrong reasons, then trusting yourself is the one thing you can do that is free, and it's an unlimited confidence boost. And I'm attributing this to Rachel Botsman. This is her work, and her website's a great resource, but she talks about us having this confident relationship with the unknown. So you start to look at the research then around people feeling uncertain and how more trustworthy we are when we are uncertain, we're more likely to be truthful. Then why wouldn't we want to share our uncertainty? Because we're sharing truthful versions and ideas with other people. There's this idea that we can trust ourselves to not be the expert. We don't have to always be right. And it's okay to perhaps say, well, here's what I think. And you don't have to be right. That's okay. And yes, people might be judging you, but they're probably judging you more on how you sound than what you say. And that's terrible, but it's just the truth. You know, people are looking for confidence. So let's bring in Kristin Neff. And if you've been to any of my training sessions previously, you'll know I either talk about Amy Edmondson and psychological safety, or I talk about Kristin Neff and self-compassion. And she says 3 things here that link back to those 2 pieces of research we've looked at today. So the idea that people who have more self-compassion have less fear of failure. Well, that's good, isn't it? Because we know that the fear of failure is the thing that holds us back. It's the thing that stops us saying what we think because we think we might not be smart enough or other people are smarter than us. She says that they're more willing to take risks. Well, that's good too, because we know that when we're uncertain, we won't take big risks. And she says that also there's a higher performance confidence. Well, that's good because we know that people are judging us on that rather than what we say. So this idea that trust and compassion are actually all you need with yourself, not skill or ability, to improve or reduce those imposter experiences that you might have. And the thing is, when you start trusting yourself, other people will trust you as well. So go back to your list, and you might have put down 1, 2, 3, 4 different roles. And I asked you to think about the roles that you felt more imposter experiences in. And I wonder, and I'm curious for you, do you trust yourself in those roles? The ones where you feel more confident, is that because you trust yourself? Maybe you've done that role longer. I know with my child, he's like 9, nearly 10, and I've got more confidence in myself as a parent, but I trust myself more because I failed more. So, you know, the truth there is that there have been many good parenting moments, and there have been some really kind of dodgy ones as well, perhaps. But capturing what really happened is very important. And on balance, when I look back at certain work situations, I can look back and go, my memory just picks out those big moments. And sometimes those big moments are good ones, sometimes they're less good. But I know that there's more in between, and I know there's more nuance to my experiences. So I think seeking out those true stories is something that you could really start to do. And that's really easy because you've got thinking around, well, how do I capture what really happened? And ways in which you might want to do that is to ask people, is to say, how was that for you? What are your thoughts? I'm curious, what do you think about this? How did that land for you? And curiosity, we know, goes hand in hand with self-compassion. So all of this makes sense then when we start to think about imposter feelings. We forget our actual achievements, we remember a feeling or a doubt, maybe because that emotion's big. That gist though becomes your story if you let it. So that I never know what I'm doing becomes real versus, well, I didn't know what I was doing when I was in the role of this thing, when I was doing it for 2 years and I wasn't as experienced as the other role that I've been doing for 10 years. And even when it's not true, I think what we can do is that pause and recall. So recall a specific moment where you have handled something really well. Bank this moment, keep using it and keep recalling it. You've got to remind yourself of the real facts. And that's because, guess what? We fill in our gaps with nonsense if we don't fill those gaps in with good stuff. And I think also knowing that uncertainty is so normal. It comes hand in hand with trusting yourself. You know, we want certainty, we find that easy to process, but we also find it easy to process something as simple as saying, I'm going to trust that I will make good decisions. And when you can do that, it doesn't matter what the future's going to be because trusting yourself will get you there. So, here's a couple of things that you can try. Instead of trying to shape an answer to look smart, which is, let's face it, what 99% of people do, you can just share what you know, even if it's still an idea that's just forming or becoming something in your mind. You might go, here's what I'm thinking right now. And actually, I want to go and explore this, but here's what I know now. And if your confidence is around sharing what you know, that's absolutely okay. You've also got that uncertainty being a normal thing and not a sign of incompetence. And actually, there's another bit of research that says that when we share our vulnerability, that people trust us more too. So you really can't fail. If you share something and you share it and share that you feel slightly uncertain about something, then people are going to trust you for being vulnerable. If you share something in a confident way, people are going to judge you on the confidence, not necessarily what you've shared. And these are very interesting, aren't they, in terms of psychological nuance and how people are picking things up. That thing around us always assuming that others know more. I think the world's a little bit of a bluff space, so always ask questions, be curious. And the more that we can be curious and ask kind questions will make people feel that, we're genuinely interested. It's not about catching people out. And there's this thing around, how would we want somebody to ask us a question about something, with curiosity or with suspicion? And there is a difference. So that holding back, this is what will happen. You will hold back what your insight is and you will fear being wrong and you won't take risks if you are really uncertain about something and if you're worried about being judged and if you want to get your answer absolutely right. Well, science says that you don't have to be absolutely right, that you can be uncertain, that you can be vulnerable, and people will trust you if you're confident. So, whether that's right or wrong, you really have nothing to lose in just speaking up and being who you are right now, which is perfectly imperfect. And really, really no sense in waiting until you're 100% sure. Be honest and say, here's what I'm noticing right now. And that honesty will get you everywhere. I hope that this has been a helpful session for you. I wanted to bring in some interesting psychological papers. Yes, we did look at crystal balls and confabulation, this idea that we fill in information with nonsense to really just debunk a bit of this idea that we've got something wrong with us. This is just psychology in action, isn't it? This is exactly what happens in life. This is just normal stuff that our brains do to fill in those gaps. So my final thought obviously has to come from Sex and the City, not Sex in the City. And this is that idea of don't forget to fall in love with yourself first. That's the thing that's going to help you become confident. That trust in yourself and that self-compassion, they really are two brilliant ingredients for being a confident person in your life and in your work. You can hear more about imposter phenomenon in my season 1 of my podcast, and you can get that at www.leelaange.co.uk. You can also find that on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I'm a coach and I also do workshops. So if you're interested in any of those things, you can head to the website for more information. Thank you for joining me today on this half an hour delayed workshop, and the replay will be available. And now I've got people tuning in from Australia and America, so hello, and I hope that you enjoyed the replay at a time that suited you.